Welcome to the Siljander podcast, where you will find actionable tips, tricks, and strategies for the millennials. In this show, we will dive into content that will teach you how to live with more ease, confidence, and authenticity. Here we will start with a foundation of compassion for ourselves, and then spread that compassion to others. We believe that this chain of acceptance and fortitude can radically change our families, communities, and beyond. And I am your host, Laura Siljander, yoga teacher, mental health coach, outdoor enthusiast, and lover of red wine. So grab your headphones and get ready to learn, grow, and to be inspired to live a life filled with intention and wellness. If you like the show, follow me on Instagram at practice_compassion, or check out my website, laurasiljander.com. I am so glad you are here, and I hope you enjoy the show. All right, y'all, welcome back to the Siljander podcast. Stoked to be with you today. Today is going to be a little bit of a different type of episode. I think you're going to enjoy it and find some value. At least I hope so. My wife and I are still on the road. We spent some time in Ridgeway, Ouray, Telluride, Moab, and we kind of beat our bodies into the ground with hiking and biking and all the outdoor activities. It was so much fun. And usually when I do trips like this, I come out of it from a very spiritual place. I feel like I'm really connected with nature and God. And that was kind of the episode I was going to go for today. However, it's funny how life does this. It totally flipped me upside down in a different direction. And so I really wanted to talk to you all about something. If you've read the title of the episode, you already know what we're going to be talking about, and that's money, honey. I know I've already done an episode on this, but I have some more up-to-date, more exact stuff to talk to you about. It was actually one of my most downloaded episodes, so this is clearly what you want, and it's what I'm going to give you. All right, just to preface this, I may get really inspired and stoked and excited, and you may be hearing this in my voice. I'll probably be a little less chill and a little bit more on fleek. Let's get into this. So let's talk about what normal looks like these days. So let's just assume that you went to college, or maybe you are in college and you needed to take out some student loans. Loan number 1. And then, of course, you had to buy a car. So that's loan number 2. And then you really needed those pair of shoes for that wedding you were going to. So you put it on a credit card because you couldn't afford it because they were like, I don't know, Jimmy Choos or something. That's loan number 3, essentially. And now, or maybe one day, you want to have a home. You don't want to rent your whole life. You actually want a home. So you take out a mortgage. I mean, how many loans are we talking about now? So before you know it, you're up to your ears in tens of thousands of dollars in debt. And you're swimming in it. And you don't know what to do. And it's kind of choking you out a little bit. So what is normal actually right now? Normal equals drowning in loans. Normal equals being in debt your whole life. Normal can mean bondage. But what if you didn't have any debt? What would that actually feel like, where you had a paycheck and it didn't have to go to a credit card? What would it feel like to actually have a really big savings account? What would it feel like to actually buy things in cash? So you may be thinking, Laura, what universe are you living in? Everyone has debt. Debt is totally normal. Or perhaps you're thinking, I'm so over my head in this topic, I don't even know where to start. So I'm just going to keep on spending and doing what I'm doing and putting myself into a hole of debt. It seems pretty hopeless for some of us. So I know money is a taboo subject, and it's not something that you really talk about over kombucha or craft beer. But let's talk about this because it affects us all. We're all trying to make a living. And I know that for some of us, debt can keep us up at night. I mean, I was there. Or maybe it's a point of contention in a relationship you're in. I mean, it's no mystery that money definitely affects relationships for better or for worse. People get divorced over this. So whether you're thinking about getting married one day, do you really want to bring a mountain-sized pile of debt into your relationship? Or are you already in a marriage and this could be just something that you're super stressed about with your partner? So in this episode, let's talk about how you can make your money actually behave the way you want to. Let's pull yourself out of that hole and let's talk about some ways to do that. So I started this debt-free journey, say maybe a year or two ago, and I did this when I got married. And so I thought, what better way to do this episode than to do it with my wife? Hi, babe.
Hi, babe.
So again, we started this journey together. We're continuing down this journey. We are not completely debt-free, but we're trying to get there. So do you mind if I ask you a few questions?
Of course.
All right, let's dive into this. What were some of the mistakes we made, or that you made, or that I made?
I know personally before we met, I found myself in credit card debt, which is a fairly common mistake. I would imagine a lot of people have found themselves making. It probably started off as what seemed to be necessities. Probably not Jimmy Choos, but shoes I thought I needed, or little things that piled up.
Do you know what Jimmy Choos are?
Sort of.
Oh yes, credit card debt. So the first trip that we took together was to Italy, and I bought a $1,600 plane ticket on a credit card. Yes, credit card debt is a huge one. That's totally typical. I'm sure you've been there too, y'all. I think something that I thought about with mistakes is I thought debt was normal. I thought having a mortgage is normal. I thought having bills piled up was completely just a way of life. So I didn't think it was such a bad thing. I would go spend my money, and if I didn't have enough, I would just put it on a card and hopefully pay for it later. Maybe something will happen where I win the lottery and I can just pay it all off. I was in a fantasy land, but I honestly thought debt was normal. So I think that was my mistake. I got a car loan. I had credit cards as well. I was in the military and I even had to take out student loan to pay for a credit card I couldn't afford because I went over on it. So yeah, those were overspending, I think. I think getting caught up in what I wanted and I had to have it right now. I think that's where I went wrong too. When do you think this became a priority? Money actually became a priority to you when you just stopped overspending and you stopped just swiping your credit card whenever you wanted something, even though you could afford it or not.
Money became more of a priority for me, or at least getting control of my finances became more of a priority for me several years ago, in part because I was making more money, but I didn't necessarily know where it was going. And we spend so much time working and so much effort working. It's silly when that money just disappears. We need to let it work for us.
You wanted to make your money behave because you were making more and you had no idea where it went and you didn't really have a lot to show for it.
Exactly, which I don't think is all that uncommon, that we spend what we have. Or what's actually fairly common is lifestyle drift, they call it, where you live on what you make. And as you start to make more money, you spend that extra money. So instead of this 10-year-old used car, you think, oh, even though I may not need a new car, my old car works just fine, I should get a new one because I can afford it. Or another very common one is you go to take out a mortgage, which, by the way, most everyone pays for over the course of 30 years. That's very common. You go to get a loan for this large amount of money, and whoever's going to lend you this money is more than happy to let you pay it off over 30 years because they're going to make so much money off of the interest you're paying because you're borrowing that money. And you walk in to buy a house or to qualify for a mortgage, and the first question isn't how much do you want to spend, it's what do you qualify for? Because they want to sell you the biggest possible house they can. And I didn't want to live that way. I didn't want my entire paycheck or a large portion of my paycheck going towards a house just because I could afford it. And so having some of those experiences, tangible experiences where you could see the amount of money you would be paying over the course of 30 years was eye-opening. And it was kind of a wake-up call that we could do better.
I remember sitting there when we got our house, and we got our house for $190, and I think the payoff after 30 years was in the 400,000s. I remember seeing that number and just kind of freaking out a little bit. So that brings me to the next topic, the why. Why do we want to be debt-free? Why? The why, if you don't have a good why, then you're totally going to get off the wagon. You're going to hop off the wagon and be like, I'm out of here, because you're going to want to buy the things and you're going to want the nice car and the pretty house that's decked out in whatever style you want. So the why, and my why came in almost angry. One day I was looking at the mortgage and Lisa showed me how much interest we're paying. And I got so mad. I we're paying how much in interest? It made me mad. And then all of a sudden, I want to pay off all things with interest. I don't want it anymore. It's not going anywhere. I'm never going to see that money again. So my why came in the form of anger over interest, because that's money I'll never, ever see. And then my second why came up while I was on this trip, which was really cool. Imagine this: no credit cards, no mortgage, no car payment, none of that. I'm asking you to reflect, what is your why to be out of debt? If that is something that you want to try to do. Babe, what would you say your why is?
My why is very similar. It's broadly freedom. I love the idea of being able to travel more and more. And then even a bit more long term, my why is that although I absolutely love my job, I don't want to work until I'm 65, or I don't want to have to work until I'm 65. And that's a common retirement age, and there are some benefits that come along with turning 65. So in part, that's why it's so common. But that doesn't have to be the age at which you retire if you plan well in the years prior to whatever that date may be. So I love the idea of freedom. I love the idea of having choices, and ultimately those are my whys.
What is your why? Can you think about what your life would be like without any debt? Find your why, because that why is going to be the gas in your tank to get you there, to keep you on the wagon and not fall off. So let's get into some more crucial items. Let's figure out how to freaking do this, because we are in the process of doing this. Let's start from the beginning, shall we? A way to start saving money is something that I went over a little bit in my first podcast episode called Money Honey. And that is the whole idea of this appearance thing that we're trying to do. We are trying to buy a nice house, wear nice clothes, drive a nice car to hold up this appearance as this is who I am. Now, I'm not saying you can't have nice things, but it gets to the point where it starts to take your wallet and put you in the negative rather than in the positive. That's step number one, is to try to cut that out, that trying to keep up with what your neighbors are doing or your tribe is doing.
It's interesting because that reminds me of a book I would recommend called The Millionaire Next Door. And granted, thinking about being a millionaire may be far outside of what you can imagine right now. But this particular book talks about what a millionaire looks like. And they're not usually the ones driving the fancy cars or living in the large house, but instead they're the ones that have been careful with their money and have saved and have invested. And that's why they have money. So they may not look like they have money, but in fact, they're the ones that do.
What was that quote that your mom told you about cars when you were a little bit younger, when you got your first real job?
Yeah, when I got my first real job, I was really excited. And I told my mom as I was applying for this job that I thought it paid well because one of my friends that worked there drove a really nice car. And she just laughed and said, "Yeah, but do you know if the car is actually paid for?" And looking back, I'm certain the car was not actually paid for.
There you have it, folks. Let's do some actionable steps again. We are a little bit obsessed with our friend Uncle Dave Ramsey. Now, for those of you who are a little bit fearful of a conservative Christian guy, you got to look past some of the stuff if you don't agree with his faith, because what he has to say about finances is the bomb. He has something called the baby step, and that is something that we follow. Not 100%, but I would say a good 85% is all Dave Ramsey. And he has gotten us out, I shouldn't say he, but his baby steps has gotten us out of so much debt in a short amount of time. I would say in about 2 years, we have paid about $90,000 of debt off. We are so deep into Dave Ramsey's baby steps that we are going to hopefully be mortgage free as soon as possible. We are going to pay off my last mistake, which is a student loan, this month. And then all we have left is the necessities like insurance and such, but our mortgage, it's our only consumer debt that we have left over. And so the first baby step of Dave Ramsey is to save $1,000. It's baby step number one, to put $1,000 in an emergency fund. So most people can do this even if you're making minimum wage. Doesn't matter how long it takes, but just to start building a little bit of savings, $1,000. Baby step number 2 is to pay off all debt except your mortgage. And what you do is you line up all of your debt from the smallest amount to the largest amount and start paying off your smallest amount. Now, psychologically, this is a behavioral change kind of thing. You start to gain momentum and it starts to feel really good to pay off debt. However, from a financial standpoint, from a numbers standpoint, this doesn't make as much sense. Usually you want to pay off the thing that you have the highest interest rate on. However, if that's the biggest loan or the biggest credit card you have, you may struggle with that momentum. So you need to find what works for you. Dave says to do the smallest debt to the largest debt. So it just kind of depends on what you want to do. After that is baby step number 3, and that's to save 3 to 6 months in an emergency fund. So if you were to lose your job, what would you need for about 3 to 6 months just to keep you afloat, to keep your rent going, food in your mouth, and the lights on? Baby step number 4 is to invest in your retirement. Dave says to put 15% in there. However, we put in a little bit more than that because we also follow someone called Financial Independence or the Firewalkers. Babe, do you want to tell us about them?
Of course, those individuals that wish to have that freedom to be able to retire early. And so they just 100% do everything they can in order to stash away money, in particular to invest it, so that it grows over time, so that they aren't working any longer than they have to.
So just to piggyback off that a little bit, those are the folks who don't want to necessarily work until they're 65. And if that's not a goal of yours, then you know what? That's not a big deal. That's not what matters. It's like I said earlier, you got to find your why. And for some people, they want to retire a little bit earlier. So moving on to baby step number 5, it's to save for your kiddos' college. So if you're wanting to have kiddos and you want to send them off to college, it's to save for that. And the very last step is to pay off your mortgage. And those are the baby steps of Dave Ramsey that we follow super close. So he has a podcast that you can feel inspired by where they do debt-free screams and he gives more precise money advice. And you can just find that at the Dave Ramsey podcast. He also has books that you can buy and workbooks and courses. So that's something I would recommend. And again, for some of you, you may just have to get past his Christian beliefs. I haven't actually heard a lesbian on a show yet, but maybe they'll take us. What do you think?
We might as well give it a try in a few years.
All right. So I'm trying to give you really concrete ways to think and actually do this. And hopefully at least I'm planting a seed and then that seed continues to get watered and it will grow. I don't want you to live in debt if that's not something that you want to live with. And you will hear that people say don't pay off your mortgage because it's a tax write-off. To be honest, I'd rather not have a mortgage than a measly tax write-off. Just think about that. Okay, I'm off my soapbox. This morning, I got a little bit annoyed and we started talking about budgeting. And I'm like, oh, budget. I feel like I'm claustrophobic. I can't buy what I want. What about food? What if I want to go see my family? So budgets seem really constricting. But let me take you back to when I was having coffee this morning and my wife checked our credit card statement and says, oh, our credit card's at $500. And I'm like, what? How did that happen? We just paid it off because we use travel cards so we can travel essentially for free, but we pay our credit cards down at $0 every month. But we're already up to $500 again. I'm like, wait, why? And that's when I went, oh, darn, I think we actually do have to learn how to budget our money. Dollar for dollar, where is it going? Because at the beginning of this, we were talking about how you work, and you have nothing to show for it except for a bunch of stuff or a bunch of stuff in storage. Right now, we're in the process of learning how to budget. And again, it got me kind of fired up and angry because I'm like, $500? What happened? So this isn't going to be the last time we're going to learn and talk and grow with money. The next time that the two of us come to you, we're going to learn and have some concrete tips on how to actually budget. So at the end of your paycheck, you're not like, where on earth did all my money go? I mean, imagine all the work hours you're doing. Imagine the millions of dollars you actually have made over a lifetime. And what do you have to show for it? That's not something that I want to live with. And I don't want my audience and I don't want you to live with that either. So let's summarize a little bit of what we covered and to leave you maybe with a few more resources. Being normal means being in debt. Buying whatever you want, even though you can't afford it, means you're going to be in debt. Keeping up with the Joneses is going to mean that you're going to be in debt. So those are just some things to think about, maybe to journal about. Where do you stand on those 3 items? Lifestyle creep. This is tough because especially if you're a wine drinker like me and you taste the good stuff, you want the good stuff, not the stuff that you had in college because that's all you can afford. I'm not saying don't enjoy life. I'm just saying beware of your lifestyle creep. Just because everyone else is going to be driving a really sweet Toyota 4Runner doesn't mean you need to go out and buy a pearl white one too. Saving $1,000. And then after that, working your debt snowball, lining them up from the smallest debt to the highest debt. And I would say just hang out right there until you're debt free with at least your consumer debt. And consumer debts are your credit cards, student loans, personal loans, medical loans, car loans, and then working the rest of Dave Ramsey's steps. And again, if you want to feel inspired and feel hopeful, check out his podcast, The Dave Ramsey Show. And now Lisa has some different resources that she has read and has dove into too that maybe could be helpful for you.
If you enjoy reading, I've read some great books in the past few years. The Millionaire Next Door by Thomas Stanley is one that's really enlightening. Another really good one is Your Money or Your Life, Vicki Robin and Joe Dominguez. And that really hits home the point that we spend so much time working. Hopefully, we have something to show for that. If you're interested in investing, which I highly, highly recommend, I know it can be really, really intimidating, but it doesn't have to be. And a good book on investing is called The Simple Path to Wealth by J.L. Collins. And it sort of demystifies the whole process and makes it something that you can embrace. And then lastly, I would say if you want to start tracking your money, and that can help perhaps with developing a budget, there are a lot of great websites out there that you can link your accounts to. One that I use and that we use to track our money is called Personal Capital. In addition, if you're also intrigued by possibly retiring early, you could look up a podcast called Choose FI, or just simply do a Google search for financial independence, and that will lead you to a lot of other resources. Another great podcast related to money and maybe money mistakes or looking for advice on a variety of things is The Clark Howard Show.
Thanks, babe. So I'm going to put all of those links and resources into the show notes, and that way if you're more visual, you'll have them right there. All right, y'all. I know that finances is scary, and like I said, it can keep you up at night and you just don't even want to face it because it's so intense and hard and you're in over your head. I hear you that if I can figure it out, I totally trust that you can too. I don't have my PhD, master's degree, no degrees in this. It's just I want my money to work for me instead of against me. So you just gotta take the first step. I know it's scary. So I know this podcast was a little bit longer and there's so much more I can go into about this subject, and I'm going to have numerous Money Honey podcasts because I just feel like this is such an important topic because this affects your mental health, your emotional health, your relational health with the people that you're sharing your money with, kids, family members, spouses. So this isn't going to be the last time you hear from this because this is such a humongous topic. So I'm just going to leave you with those thoughts, and please reach out if you have any questions or if you want something covered in the next Money Honey episode, we're going to do it. So that's all for now. And to remember, this is a very sensitive, taboo topic. So to practice compassion with that, to give yourself some grace, give yourself a little bit of compassion, even if you made mistakes. We've already listed our mistakes out there, but to be kind to yourself. I will talk to you next week.